Welcome to this custom-tailored Dup Dive. We are incredibly glad you're joining us today because we are stepping into some truly uncharted, and I mean deeply complex, territory.
Yeah, it is a massive topic today.
It really is. Our mission today is to act as your guides through this huge stack of audio transcripts you've provided us.
Right. And these sources outline a sprawling alternative narrative that basically attempts to completely redefine how we look at nanotechnology, modern healthcare, and strangely enough, the wellness and supplement industry.
Exactly. So the goal here is to extract the core arguments from this material, save you from the overwhelming information overload that usually plagues these kinds of topics, and just map out the architecture of this specific worldview so you can understand exactly how it's constructed.
That is the goal. But before we get into the mechanics of this narrative, we really need to establish a very clear framework for this discussion.
Yes, definitely.
Because the source materials we are diving into today contain some highly charged content. They touch on deeply controversial scientific and political topics, pulling heavily from both mainstream institutional concepts and the absolute furthest reaches of the alternative media space. Providing an analytical breakdown of this particular perspective, and the perspective presented in these transcripts is built around a rather profound paradox.
It really is. The hook that anchors this entire deep dive is a massive contradiction regarding the alternative health space. The central premise asks, what if the very products being sold to you right now, products marketed specifically to protect you from invasive advanced technology, are, in this specific worldview, the exact mechanisms delivering that technology into your body?
It completely flips the script on essentially everything typically discussed in alternative health circles.
Completely.
And it's a compelling architectural choice for a counter-narrative because it instantly creates this sense of ubiquitous, inescapable tension.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the sheer scale of what the speaker calls the deployed technology narrative.
Right, the deployment.
Because the fundamental argument being made in these transcripts isn't about some dystopian, far-off future where human augmentation might happen eventually.
No, the narrative hinges on the idea that bioelectronic medicine and human augmentation are fully deployed systems functioning right now, today.
And the speaker provides a very specific timeline to anchor this claim, don't they?
They do. They trace the deployment all the way back to the 2011 to 2014 timeframe.
Wow, that long ago.
Yeah. According to the transcript, the framework for this was established through medical body area networks, or WBANs. The sources claim these networks were approved back then by major regulatory bodies.
And they name specific ones.
Yes, explicitly naming the FDA, the FCC, and the IE. For context, the IE is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. They are the organization that sets the global technical standards for things like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth.
So major established organizations.
Exactly. And the argument asserts that the blueprints for these medical body area networks have just been sitting openly in congressional archives since 2014.
And the frustration in the speaker's voice on the audio is palpable. They argue that the public is completely blind to this simply because people refuse to read dense technical documentation.
Which is a fair point about human nature, honestly.
True. The transcripts point directly to the National Nanotechnology Initiative, specifically referencing their official website, nano.gov, and they claim that our tax dollars have been funding this deployment for 26 years.
So in this worldview, this isn't science fiction being developed in some secret underground lab.
No, it's standard government bureaucracy and corporate business operating in plain sight.
What's fascinating here is how the speaker completely dismisses the conventional popular fears about microchips.
Right, the classic syringe and chip idea.
Exactly. When most people think of surveillance tech, they imagine that classic sci-fi trope of a tiny metallic chip being injected via a syringe.
And the speaker calls that outdated nonsense.
Outdated nonsense, yes. Instead, they introduce the concept of human activity recognition radar. According to the sources, modern biosurveillance doesn't need a traditional microchip at all.
So how does it work then?
It relies on a 70-year-old acoustic radar technology that simply listens to your natural biological rhythms. We're talking about monitoring your heartbeat, your blood flow, and even tracking the atmospheric pressure inside and outside your body.
The body itself acts as the sensor.
Precisely.
That completely shifts the paradigm from putting a machine in the body to using the body as the machine.
And this ties directly into one of the more explosive claims in the transcripts regarding the COVID-19 vaccines.
Right, specifically mentioning the ones produced by Pfizer and Moderna.
Yes. The speaker asserts that the only reason these shots functioned was because of something called a nanolipid payload.
a nanolipid payload.
According to this narrative, this wasn't just a standard vaccine delivery mechanism. It was a payload system designed specifically for precision targeting, loading nanoparticles into the body to interface with these larger pre-existing bioelectronic networks.
And the sources then weave these medical claims into a much larger corporate tapestry.
They do. The argument points to major entities like Oracle, SoftBank, and various tech industry leaders claiming they are promising 48-hour cancer cures.
48 hours. That's a bold claim to make. And the method for achieving this?
Through what the speaker calls Healthcare 4.0.
Healthcare 4.0.
Right, which is described as a massive system of continuous remote patient monitoring that is allegedly already being integrated with Medicare and Social Security databases.
The narrative even brings in military documentation to prove these concepts aren't tightly guarded secrets.
Oh yeah, they reference Pentagon Directive 3009.
Which deals with lethal autonomous drones, noting that the underlying technological concepts are openly documented right now in standard college textbooks.
So the core argument the speaker is making is basically, wake up, it's already here, it's fully deployed, and society is arguing about technological milestones that were quietly passed a decade ago.
Which brings us to a fascinating pivot in the transcripts.
Yeah, this part is wild.
Because if you assumed the speaker's primary anger was directed at the government or the pharmaceutical companies developing this tech, that assumption would be completely incorrect.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The speaker reserves their absolute harshest criticism not for mainstream institutions, but for the alternative media itself.
Specifically targeting what they call the truther community.
The speaker outright accuses prominent alternative media figures of running counterintelligence operations against their own audiences.
And they don't hold back on names. The transcripts single out entities and individuals like the Omniwar presentation, Candace Owens, Russell Brand, and Sasha Latipova.
And the specific accusation is that these figures purposefully scare the public about easily misunderstood technologies.
Like AMA CIDs or graphene.
Right, only to turn around and sell them a supposed cure. The psychological angle of this critique is brilliant when you look at how counter-narratives are structured.
It really is.
The speaker is essentially claiming that these alternative media figures are weaponizing their audience's existing distrust of the mainstream, creating a massive market of fear, and then monopolizing the solution.
And this leads us to the most passionate argument in the entire stack of transcripts.
The zeolite paradox.
Yes. This is where the narrative really drills down into the mechanics of the wellness industry. In the alternative health community, people are frequently sold a natural mineral called zeolite as a heavy metal detox.
Right, it's specifically marketed to rid the body of nanotech and graphene.
But the speaker introduces a major contradiction into this space. They claim that the zeolite being pushed isn't just a simple natural volcanic mineral.
What is it then, according to them?
According to the source, it is actually a patented, electrically tunable metamaterial.
An electrically tunable metamaterial.
And apparently it's just one of 40 such materials currently being utilized.
The transcripts detail the mechanics of this claim extensively. Zeolite, by its nature, is highly porous.
Very porous, yes.
But the speaker argues that its specific nanoscale topology, the actual physical structure of it at a microscopic level, is explicitly designed to act as a payload loader.
It has these tiny internal channels that can cage or alter immune system enzymes.
So by convincing health-conscious people to drink the zeolite daily to detox, the narrative argues that these alternative media figures are tricking the public into voluntarily ingesting the exact same biosensing technology that was in the injected shots.
The phrase they use in the audio is striking.
What is it?
They say people are drinking the shot every day.
Drinking the shot every day.
Yeah. The psychological irony here is a core pillar of the speaker's argument. Instead of a one-time injection that an individual might have actively refused, that same individual is voluntarily paying money out of pocket to dump a daily dose of this metamaterial down their throat.
Firmly believing it is keeping them safe from the very system they are inadvertently helping to build.
Exactly. And the strategic reason for this, according to the narrative, is to create a redundancy network.
A redundancy network. So, by getting massive amounts of this electrically tunable metamaterial into the population via daily supplements, it allegedly allows Health and Human Services and other agencies to establish robust, fail-safe remote patient monitoring across the board.
Every single person taking the supplement becomes a node in a massive, interconnected biological network.
They even outline a very specific recipe that is supposedly being pushed by these wellness influencers, don't they?
Oh yeah, they get very specific. It involves taking the zeolite, combining it with methylene blue, and then following it up with conductive metals like colloidal silver or gold.
And the speaker breaks down the alleged function of each ingredient.
They do.
Hmm.
For instance, they claim methylene blue is used to give artificial intelligence greater contrast visibility of your biology.
So it's acting essentially as a biological dye for the AI algorithm to read your internal systems more clearly.
Exactly. And then the silver, or gold, is portrayed as building a highly conductive antenna system right inside your gut microbiome.
It perfectly encapsulates the central thesis of the speaker's anger. It's the belief that the public is being played from both sides.
Steered away from mainstream medical interventions, only to be shepherded toward enthusiastically swallowing the exact same underlying technology.
Simply because it's disguised in a bottle labeled as a natural alternative remedy.
This raises an obvious logistical question, though.
Right.
If a system of this magnitude were truly deployed inside millions of people, how on earth is it supposed to work without anyone noticing?
Yeah, how do these supposed biosensors communicate and operate completely under the radar of independent researchers or medical professionals?
Exactly.
Wait, if they aren't using traditional radio frequencies or physical computer chips, how is the data supposedly getting out of the body? I mean, it can't just be magic.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the speaker introduces a concept called biomimetic synthetic biology.
Biomimetic synthetic biology.
This is the foundation of what the transcripts refer to as the Internet of Bio-Nano-Things.
The Internet of Bio-Nano-Things.
Okay. The claim is that these advanced networks don't use standard electronics at all. They don't rely on tiny silicon chips or traditional radio frequencies that a hobbyist with a scanner could easily detect.
So what do they use?
Instead, they use molecular communication and biological signals. Think of biomimetic synthetic biology, like a digital wolf in sheep's clothing.
Okay, I follow.
The argument is that these sensors are dressed up in your body's own biological language. Because they mimic natural cellular communication, your immune system simply ignores them, assuming they are native to your biology.
This brings up a really specific critique the speaker has for an alternative media figure named Jesse Beltran.
Oh, right, the scanner guy.
Yeah. Beltran apparently uses a device called a nonlinear junction detector to scan bodies and prove the existence of these nanonetworks.
For context, a nonlinear junction detector is a piece of equipment that fires radiofrequency pulses, RF pulses, to detect the presence of electronic components, even if they are turned off.
It's the kind of thing security teams use to sweep a room for hidden microphones.
Right. And Beltran claims that if the device beeps when scanning a person, it proves they have nanotech in them.
But the speaker vehemently argues that Beltran's approach is entirely stuck in the 1990s.
Completely outdated. The claim is that any real, modern nanonetwork deployed by the military or healthcare sectors is built from the ground up to shield itself from external radio frequency.
In this worldview, that is just a basic cybersecurity measure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If a simple outside RF pulse from a commercially available detector could locate or disrupt the sensors, the whole multi-billion-dollar system would be vulnerable to immediate sabotage.
So instead of easily detectable radio frequencies, the speaker claims these systems rely on optical signals, pressure, and sound.
Specifically mentioning the terahertz spectrum.
Right. To clarify, the terahertz spectrum refers to high-frequency waves that sit right between microwaves and infrared light on the electromagnetic spectrum.
It's often used in advanced imaging, but the speaker claims it's being utilized here as a highly localized, invisible communication web.
And most importantly, they bypass traditional microchips entirely by directly connecting to the human peripheral nervous system.
To ground these claims in reality and demonstrate just how vulnerable the human body actually is to external hacking, the sources pull from some very real historical anecdotes.
Like former Vice President Dick Cheney.
Yes, they reference Dick Cheney, who famously had his pacemaker's wireless capabilities disabled by his cardiologist in 2007.
Out of fear of an assassination attempt via hacking.
Exactly.
They also bring up Barnaby Jack, a famous cybersecurity researcher.
This is a really tragic but fascinating example.
In 2012, Barnaby Jack demonstrated that he could wirelessly command implanted insulin pumps to deliver lethal doses from up to 50 feet away.
And tragically, he died just days before he was scheduled to present further research at the DEF CON cybersecurity conference on how to wirelessly hack pacemakers.
The speaker uses these real, verifiable historical events to anchor their narrative, essentially arguing, look, if the vulnerabilities of wireless medical devices were a known reality back in 2012, imagine what kind of invisible networks are deployed today.
And this leads directly to the speaker's absolute frustration over the public's misunderstanding of MCIDs.
Oh, the Bluetooth MCID panic.
Yes. We've all seen the viral stories of people looking at their phone's Bluetooth settings, seeing strange, unidentified MCIDs pop up, and panicking, assuming they have a microchip implanted in them.
The speaker points out that MCID architecture was invented by Xerox 40 years ago.
40 years ago.
For context, a MCID is basically a digital license plate assigned to a device so it can identify itself and connect to a network.
And the speaker is thoroughly exasperated by this whole microchip panic. They claim you don't need a physical RFID chip implanted in you to generate one of these digital license plates.
So where is the MCID coming from then?
According to this narrative, the peripheral nervous system itself is allegedly being hijacked to serve as the network interface.
Wait, your actual nerve endings?
Your actual nerve endings are functioning as the hardware.
That is a complete paradigm shift in how we are being asked to view biological technology.
It is. You aren't hosting a machine. In this narrative, your biology is being utilized as the machine.
That's why the speaker is so furious with the people using radiofrequency detectors or selling natural metal detoxes.
Right. They believe it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the physics, the cybersecurity, and the biology of these deployed systems.
So what does this all mean? Why did we take you on this deep dive today through such an intense, controversial, and frankly complex narrative?
Because regardless of whether you believe a single word of these claims, this material serves as an absolute masterclass in how alternative media narratives are constructed today.
Just look at the architecture of the argument we just explored.
It's a fascinating structural analysis. It shows how incredibly dense, highly technical jargon terms like electrically tunable metamaterials, the terahertz spectrum, biomimetic synthetic biology, and nanoscale topology can be woven together to create a deeply compelling, internally consistent counter-narrative.
And it's a narrative that manages to challenge both the established narratives of mainstream institutions and the accepted dogmas of the alternative media itself.
It paints both the government deploying the technology and the wellness gurus fighting against it as two sides of the exact same coin.
Both allegedly profiting off the public's lack of technical literacy.
This raises an important question for anyone trying to navigate the modern information landscape.
Definitely.
We live in an era characterized by overwhelming information and conflicting absolute claims. We face with this kind of material, the most valuable skill you can possess isn't just fact-checking individual data points.
It's the ability to step back and dissect the mechanics of the argument itself.
You have to look at the underlying motives. You have to understand the business of market share. Who is profiting from the fear and who is profiting from the cure?
It requires recognizing the human psychology at play when vulnerable populations are presented with terrifying complex problems and magically simple natural solutions.
It really forces you to examine how narratives are built, consumed, and monetized.
And as we wrap up this deep dive into these transcripts, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that takes the core anxiety of this specific worldview and applies it to our very real future.
A provocative thought.
Exactly. If the trajectory of medical technology truly does become microscopic, if it becomes entirely invisible and fully integrated with our natural biology to the point where we blur the absolute line between human cells and digital sensors, how will society establish any kind of framework for bodily autonomy when we can no longer even see the technology we are interacting with?
When the machine becomes completely indistinguishable from the person, defining consent becomes a profoundly difficult challenge.
A huge question to consider as technology continues to evolve. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.